So, hi, Colin. Thank you so much for accepting this interview. We're really excited to hear more about podcasting, as the next level of content. We have seen a large increase in podcasts lately, and we all want to find out how we can do it so that we can have more content out there and hopefully understand also if it's a good fit, Colin.
Indeed, yeah. No, thanks for having me. Happy to go through it all and espouse the medium of podcasting.
Oh, that's great. Well, Colin is a podcast presenter, trainer, and speaker. His blog is full of amazing information about all the details you need to become a great podcaster. So I do recommend that you look him up. I will be sharing the links after the interview. And I would like to begin with listening to your story. So how did you get into podcasting, Colin?
I started out in education. So I was a lecturer at a university in Edinburgh. There's three there. It was Edinburgh and Napier University I worked at, and I was teaching lecturers how to be better teachers, basically. And the main medium of that, my sort of speciality was technology. So using any kind of technology to teach more effectively. So I was teaching things like blogs and wikis, and we had our virtual learning environment there, which is just a bit of software that the students use to get all their notes and everything. And basically podcasting came along as a fancy new fashionable way to teach people. That was back in about 2007 or so. So I ended up learning how to podcast because I wanted to teach it to lecturers as a teaching tool. But it just happened that along the way, I kind of fell in love with the medium. I loved the whole concept around podcasting. I fell in love with listening to the shows as well. I got so deep into searching out different shows and listening to anything audio any minute that I had free. So whenever I went for a walk or when I was driving or waiting for a bus or anything like that. So it led from there into me creating the podcasthost.com, which is the website that I run now. That was 2011, really just to write about the things I was finding out, the skills I was learning, the mics I was using, quite a lot of equipment stuff, but around sort of growing a good podcast too. So I was lucky enough over the years that website basically started doing really well, started getting a lot of attention, getting good traffic. And then 3 years ago, it got to a stage where it was earning enough income through a few different streams that I could quit my education work and jump into it full time. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And we've changed track. We're doing all sorts of different stuff. We're doing a lot of different things now than we were 3 years ago, but it's all podcasting. Lucky enough to be earning my full-time living through podcasting, which not many people do. So that's great.
Wow, that's amazing. That's great. Wow, we share something in common. My background's in education as well.
Oh, excellent. Good stuff.
It's a natural medium, isn't it? When you love teaching, it's just kind of, you find it through anything you love, which is great.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
That's amazing. So, with my clients, most of my clients are already blogging. Well, actually, all of them are already blogging, but most of them have been blogging for some time and perhaps are ready to jump in and start a podcast. Do you feel podcasting is for everybody? Do you need to have specific goals like list building or SEO? Or does it go beyond that?
Podcasting can be for everyone, but it's not for everyone. I mean, it's a medium that suits certain types of people, I think. For example, I think it can work for anyone in that the real power of podcasting is engagement. So I think it works really effectively alongside blogging and video. And the people that I see it make work most effectively are doing all three, but in a smart way. So you're not having to spend so much time doing all three. You make them work together. The way I see it is that, text is the entry level. Text is still the most widely searched. It's still the place you get the most traffic. It's the first stop with Google search or similar. You end up on text articles because they're easily searchable. Google can look at text articles and it can tell what they're about. So that's the obvious first step. But the trouble is that it's really hard to engage people. with text. You know, you have to be a really, really good writer to properly move people, to get your
Indeed.
personality across. And
Mm-hmm.
and even if you are a really good writer, it's still quite tricky to do that. So it's a good place to capture people, to catch their attention. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, the next stage is getting them to take part in your media. So that could be video, or it could be podcasting. So maybe the next stage is a quick video. You know, from the text article, you might include a video embed of you talking about that subject, for example, maybe for 2 minutes, because it's a wee bit of a step to get them to press play, and you want to make it easy for them, so it's easy to do that. So possibly they press play in the video. That means they get to know you a bit more. You know, they get to see your personality. You're a bit more, you know, transparent, a bit more honest, that type of stuff. It's easier to get your personality across through video. But video's trouble, video has trouble in terms of attention. So it's hard to get people to watch more than a few minutes of video, for example, on the web. So many distractions. There's just so many things there. And that's where podcasting comes in. Because if you can then once they know you a little bit through the video, if you can then convince them to listen to your podcast, then you get them for half an hour or 2 hours even. You know, people listen for a long time on podcasts. It's where you get real attention. And there's that kind of intimacy, that one-to-one connection you get through listening to somebody's voice, and how honest people tend to be through the audio medium. You know, it's less intimidating to speak to a microphone than a camera. So people tend to be a bit more themselves, a bit more informal, a bit more friendly. So there's that combination of that personality, that informality, that, you know, one-to-one connection, and then multiply that by the attention you get, you know, half an hour, 2 hours in somebody's ears. That's what builds great fans. That's what builds trust. It builds credibility. That's what really turns people from, you know, casual visitors into somebody that loves the stuff that you do.
Wow, you're getting me really excited about this now. Yes, I totally get what you mean. Absolutely, yes. It almost seems like a more intimate medium. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Any other medium
more
is full of
friendly.
distractions, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, but
Right.
if you've got somebody in the car or taking a walk, you know, that's all they're, you know, they're listening to you. There's no distractions. They're going somewhere else. So yeah, it's brilliant.
Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned earlier, Colin, that it makes sense to, of course, do things like blog, video, and perhaps podcast together. How can you pull off something like that?
To do
Perhaps
them
you
all.
don't have a team yet,
Yeah.
or maybe you don't have a video editor. How would
Yes.
you suggest a beginner starts off? What do we need to have in place?
Yeah, I think the starting point is it's the show notes. So you talk about the fact that most of your audience is blogging already. Is that right?
Yes.
So blogging is a great start. If you have blog content out there already, then you have the basis for some great content. You know, you could take a blog post, you could read it over yourself, and then just speak for 10 minutes about that topic, you know, based on that blog post. Then that blog post basically becomes your show notes. You end up putting your podcast player on that page, so that, you know, the person that visits that page, they read the text, they get a bit of a summary, and they go, oh, there's a player up here, maybe I can listen to it as well. And then that gets them listening to the podcast. So that's a way to start. You know, you're not having to create a separate blog post and a separate podcast on different topics, plan them all out separately, all that kind of stuff. You're actually creating it all from the one the one content idea. There's one content concept, and you're creating a podcast and a blog from that same one. Because you have to create show notes for a podcast episode anyway. To make it really effective, to make it searchable, you want to create good show notes, which really means a blog post version of that podcast. So you do both of them. And you can add video in there quite easily. The way we do it in a kind of lo-fi version is actually when we're recording a podcast episode in here. So me and Matthew, who works here too, is we record a show together. We'll be sitting behind the desk that I'm at right now, but we'll have a camera pointing at us as well. And we'll film the video of a podcast episode. Now, we won't release that whole video because a 30-minute video just of us talking to each other is not that engaging. What we will do, though, is just I'll maybe make a note as we're recording for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I'll have a piece of paper in front of me. I'll have that for all sorts of notes, but I'll also use that to note down, I like that wee segment. That was a 2-minute segment we just went through that would work well standalone. And then afterwards, I pull the video into my video editing package. I go to where that note says the time started, time stopped, and I just cut that out and I stick that straight on YouTube. So it's not actually that much work because it's just, I've I've thought about it while we're
Mm-hmm.
recording. All I do is go and do quite lo-fi, just grab it out, just don't really do much editing at all. Just take that 2-minute highlight and stick that on YouTube. And suddenly you've got a video that is a highlight from that episode that directs people towards the podcast. You can put that video into the blog post as like this is another highlight of this episode. If you want to see the whole thing or hear the whole thing, they'll go and listen to the podcast. So they all tie together and they're all around the one content idea. And because it's all around that one concept, it's much easier to create it. It's just one planning exercise. You just plan out the topic once and your bullet point plan, you create the blog post around that, you create the podcast episode around that, and then the video is just a highlight from somewhere in there. So that's how I think about a kind of starting point of doing all three at once.
That's great. That's really great. And what kind of frequency would you do this with? Obviously there's people that blog only once a week.
Yeah.
Which is kind of below the benchmark, but some people like to start from there. Let's say you're doing 2 posts a week, which is what we consider a benchmark.
Sure.
I've heard that two podcasts a week is not enough.
I don't think that's true at all. I think weekly is still a pretty standard frequency. And I think that, obviously, if you do more, then you stand a better chance of kind of engaging people really quickly because they can listen to more of your stuff. But on the other hand, podcasting takes more time. Takes more time to consume. So a half hour or an hour episode, that's a decent chunk of the time you have available in a week to listen to shows. So if you're releasing, if you're doing a daily podcast these days, you have to be like somebody's favorite or second favorite, maybe top 3 podcasts for them to be able to keep up with that, because they're going to have 10, 15, 20 other shows that they listen to. And a daily podcast takes up a lot of that time. So it's almost too much, I think, these days. Whereas if you've got a weekly show that creates great stuff, you put out one good thing every single week. I have shows that I listen to that I will religiously listen to every single week because I trust that they're putting out great stuff and they're not overextending themselves and therefore diluting the quality of their content. It's just one thing every week that I like listening to. It's part of my routine. Maybe every Wednesday I'll listen to this one show. And if they start putting out more, I would probably not listen to it all. But because it's just once a week, it figures into my routine and it works well. For me, it's that balance, isn't it, between your sustainability. Like if you try and do more than one podcast episode every week and being able to get it out there, it's because it's consistency as well. So I think weekly is still a really good frequency for podcasting.
Oh, indeed. So I have hope then. Once a week or twice a week sounds doable. I like the once a week because it's a very regular thing. In a week you're bound to have time.
Yes,
to figure that out. And like you said, this is why obviously some people blog less, because then if you're not producing quality, then you're not really doing your reputation much good. So how do you make sure you stay consistent? Procrastination sometimes can be a bit of a problem, especially for writers. Is that a problem with podcasting as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. There's a couple of things I do for this. The first of which is that I run a pretty tight schedule for our content in that I schedule in slots in the week where that is where this thing happens. So for example, Wednesday morning is my blogging time. I've got 3 hours minimum to work on the blog. So we'll be writing articles or reviewing old articles or updating things, that kind of stuff. There's always something to do with the blog. So there's always new text material coming out of us at least once a week. And Matthew does that too. So we always have at least 2 things a week. Similar with podcasting. Thursday morning is our podcasting time. So I've got 3 hours every Thursday morning to work on a podcast. So I think that's the minimum you need to do. If you want to commit to content, whether it is blogging, podcasting, video, you need to put a time in the calendar every single week to work on it. Just saying I'm going to do it sometime this week, it just doesn't work. That's when you lose your consistency. So that's the first thing. The second thing, and this helps with a few different things, but planning and consistency is one of the biggest benefits, and that's actually going with a seasons format. So a seasons-based podcast. And we do this with most of our shows, not all, but most of our shows, whereby, for example, take Podcraft. So Podcraft is our How to Podcast podcast. And we cover all sorts of topics around podcasting, but we always group it into seasons. So the last season, the previous season was highly produced podcasting. So we produced 8 episodes around how to create much more highly produced shows, like many more voices, much more editing. A previous one was a full season around monetization. Another one was a full season around equipment, so how to tackle podcast equipment. So each of these seasons has anything between maybe 4 or 5 episodes up to 20 episodes, and you plan it out almost like a course. You sit down for an hour or 2 hours and you plan out all the topics, something that answers a big question that your listeners have or your audience has. You break it down into little topics, go quite deep on each single one, and you end up with a list of episode topics to go through. And then you can kind of flesh it out with little bits of plans. And the great thing about that is once you've done that, you've got a plan for like the next 2 months, 3 months, 4 months worth of content. And that helps you get over procrastination to start with, because often that's the bit people struggle with. It's the coming up with a new topic every week. But if you've got that plan, then at least, all you have to do is sit down, turn on the mic, and then talk through that little plan that you made for yourself already. And there's a bunch of other benefits here too. One, for the listeners, it's more effective because you're going deep on something. You're linking the episodes. This episode is about this part of the topic. Then next week we're going to build on that, and then next week we're going to build on that. So each episode's actually linked. You get more people coming back. You grow your audience quicker because they're listening to every single episode, and they're getting more success as well out of it because you're teaching effectively, and therefore you get more referrals, more growth in that way as well. And the final thing, the thing that always kind of sort of side benefit of doing seasons is that you can take breaks. So you can do 3 months, 4 months, and then take a month off. And it makes a lot of sense because you're like, oh, let's finish season 3. Next season, we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this topic, but we're going to have 4 weeks off to go away and plan it. And it refreshes you. It stops you just feeling like you're on that treadmill of content, just try to get stuff out every week. It makes you more enthusiastic about it, which makes for more good content. So yeah, seasons-based podcasting, there's a whole bunch of benefits for me, and it helps a lot in terms of consistency.
That's great. That sounds awesome. I like the season model. Excellent. So thank you so much, Colin. I just have one last question for you. I will definitely, I'm sure our audience is interested in your podcast guidelines PDF. I will be sending the link, adding the link under the video for the podcast guide, so you can download Colin's guide and take it from there. Start on your journey to building your first podcast. But I think we need to end it with one very important question then, because of course we're going to start getting into the technical. I hear that the sound of the quality of your sound is going to make quite a difference to podcasting. So, as a person starting out, maybe you're not sure you're going to do it for a year. So, you're not going to spend thousands on equipment, but what are the basics to have a good quality podcast?
Yeah. So there's a few things here. First of which is that you're right, quality makes a difference. So if you have like really crackly, terrible microphone, nobody's going to listen to you because it's just painful in your ears. Similar with, Skype recordings and things like that. If you're interviewing people on your show and their side is terrible, then it's harder to help that, but there's still things you can do. So you want to make sure your interviewees are good as well, just by preparing them a little bit, by telling them some of the advice I'm about to say here. So the thing is, though, it doesn't take much to get to that minimum level of quality. You don't need professional quality by any means. As long as you're above that minimum, whereby it's not painful to listen to, it's decent quality, it's good, then it's fine. And all you need for that there's a couple of options. So the main one that we always recommend is the Samson Q2U microphone. And it's just a USB mic. I've got it right in front of me just now. I'm using one right at the moment.
Sounds good.
Yeah, good. It's a USB mic, so it can plug into your computer to record a solo show or to record a Skype call. But it's also an XLR mic, which is the sort of professional audio spec. So you could plug it into a mixer, into a digital recorder, like a Zoom H5 or something like that, and go out and get out and about recordings as well. Because it's a USB mic too, I've used it in the past, plugged it into my iPad or my smartphone and gone out for mobile recordings that way. You just need a little adapter, USB to whatever phone you're using. So it's really versatile little mic. It's really good quality, and it only costs about, I think last time I looked, it was about $60. in the US and about 45, 50 pounds in the UK or Europe. So that's a great starting point for a lot of people. The only other thing that I sometimes recommend, if you're doing a lot of in-person interviews, is there's a little setup using a SmartLav, a Rode SmartLav microphone, SmartLav Plus, and it plugs into your phone. So it's just a lavalier mic, is a little tie clip mic, clips onto your shirt, just a wee tiny thing that sort of goes below your mouth, and then you can speak into it. And Rode have released a little adapter that lets you plug 2 of these into your phone. It's called an SC6 adapter. You plug that into the bottom of your phone, and you can plug 2 SmartLav microphones into that adapter. And that means that you can interview people in person really effectively. You've got one on you, one on them, and it's actually really good quality in-person material. It's a great little setup. And that costs last time I looked, it was under £100, probably under $150 or so. So that would suit a lot of people as well. So those 2 setups, very simple, very easy, not very expensive. Both of them will get you above average audio quality compared to most podcasts, and definitely at least good enough to grow your show to tens of thousands if that's where you're going.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much. I've actually got one of those lavalier mics sitting around here somewhere with my equipment. So I'll be definitely digging that out.
Yeah.
That's great. I love doing interviews, so I'll have to get myself a second one. I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you so much for answering all our questions. I will be sharing your website and also your free guide with our listeners, and then perhaps you can follow it up through email once people download the guide. I know there's so much information on your blog that will definitely be able to find the next step forward over there. Thank you so much for being with us, Colin.
No problem at all.